Welcome to another episode of Founder Friday. I'm Calvin Keane, one of the Senior Global Business Development Managers with Microsoft for Startups. And today I'm very pleased to be joined by Nate Okonkwo from Remarkable AI. Nate, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for the time.
Good stuff. Listen, another Founder Friday. We always need to start with a little bit about the founders. So Nate, would love to hear a little bit more about your founder journey. Why you wanted to start this company, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, certainly. So I'm one of the leaders of Remarkable AI. We've been in business for 9 years, and we work with a lot of leading consumer brands to help them automate their one-to-one customer conversations across email, chat, SMS, and social, and drive revenue. Before starting this company, I was at Google for many years. I was a product manager. I worked on voice search and the Google Assistant. And there I understood how context is so important for personalizing interactions. And so we wanted to make that available to businesses as well, helping them leverage all the context that's available to personalize their customer conversations.
What was the moment that you said, I need to start this company? What was that kind of trigger moment for you as a founder? You've come from kind of a large corporate. You obviously saw a problem. What was that? What was that trigger? What was that day that you said, okay, I need to go and start this business?
Yeah, I think it was a couple of different things. One is just thinking about the problems in the world and things that I really felt passionate about and could see myself working on for a long time. I think the second is just the experience and the learning I had gained working at Google, seeing that I had the potential to be able to build something in that space. And I think finally, just thinking about customer experience. We are all customers and consumers, and we've all had experiences with brands. And that's where the name Remarkable comes from, is every customer deserves a remarkable experience, and every brand would aspire to deliver a remarkable experience to their customers, but it's just tough to do that. And then, enter AI, and we really have using AI since we started. Through the different iterations of AI, it really does make a lot of these, remarkable experiences possible now.
Fantastic. I guess traditionally, before kind of Remarkable came along and before, you started working with a bunch of your customers, how were they primarily doing their kind of one-to-one customer outreach?
Yeah, so before Remarkable, I would say brands really unable to deliver one-to-one customer conversations at scale. Usually when a brand is first starting out, the founding team is communicating with all the customers. They're doing customer support. They're writing the emails. But as the company starts to scale and grow, it gets a bit disjointed. There's now different departments. There's a customer support department. There's the retention department. There's the customer acquisition department. And everyone kind of speaks with a different voice in most companies, and it's just difficult to maintain that. And so that's where Remarkable comes in, is we actually work across the full customer lifecycle, helping with customer acquisition, customer support, and customer retention to give that one-to-one personalized experience, enabling the same thing that the founding team would have been able to do. And so it's unable to do that today at scale, but on the small scale, an SMB level, companies are always trying to do that.
How are you getting customers excited about using the product? Like, can you tell us about some of the kind of fledgling customer conversations that you had, how your pitches sort of developed over time, and I guess, how you're starting to sell to kind of larger and larger sales organizations?
Yeah, so it really is the same pitch and narrative from the first customer who told us about this problem. And the problem is essentially this: as brands grow, they get a lot of one-time shoppers. Probably 80% of shoppers are one-time shoppers, people who only shop with them once and never shop with them again. And so companies have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of customers who have basically lapsed or churned, and they're not active with them. And so this is a huge opportunity for brands to unlock a literal gold mine of customers just by reminding them about why they love the brand in the first place. And so that is the start of the conversation. We're like, hey, is this a challenge for you? Are you trying to drive repeat orders? Are you trying to win back your lapsed customers? And then our performance is that we generate $5 to $10 revenue per customer, which is around 50 times the traditional industry average is around 10 cents. So just to explain that a bit more, every time a traditional market automation sends an email, a company generates around 10 cents. And when we send, let's say, an email, we generate $5 to $10. So coupling the latent like problem of all these lapsed customers with the revenue per customer we're able to drive gets brands pretty excited about trying the solution out.
Fantastic. I noticed, when I was kind of, first met you, and then, when I was kind of delving a little bit deeper into your company, one of your sort of big mantras seems to be the retain, support, acquire, sort of 3-step process. Could you give us maybe a little bit of an anecdote around how you've helped drive a sort of tangible income and outcome with one of your customers using that mantra?
Yeah, certainly. So I'll give you an example of one of the clothing brands we've worked with for a long time, which is a really large brand called New Era Cap. They've been around for probably over 100 years now. They're the leading maker of hats in the world. So if you have like a baseball hat at home that has maybe a Yankees logo or something, you'll see this N logo on the side, and that's New Era Cap. And so they use Remarkable for their customer support. They use Remarkable for their retention. And then we also help them on social media. So if we look at the retention piece, they see that same story where we're able to generate $10 plus revenue per customer. And so the use case is, let's say you had purchased a hat from New Era a couple months ago. You might get an email that says, "Hi, Kelvin. Just checking in on you. How are you liking that hat? Do you have any feedback? Oh, by the way, here's a jacket you might like, and here's a promo code." And that sounds simple, but shockingly, like most brands are not doing that today. They're sending blasts where they're saying, "Hey, we have a new collection, or we have a new product, or it's Father's Day. Check this out." And it's not personalized to you at all. They might send you, clothing you might not like, or sizes that are not even a good fit for you. And so we ensure that all of those are going to the right customer at the right time with the right message. On the customer support side, we actually work alongside existing help desk platforms and chatbot platforms to help deliver that one-to-one experience. This comes into play particularly during peak times and peak seasons. So for a company like New Era, they're quite seasonal, right? When there's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, holiday shopping, they see a huge spike in tickets. And there could be warehouse issues. There could be delays in shipping. And so any tickets that are not resolved, by the existing platforms, like Remarkable goes in and solves those most complex scenarios around refunds, cancellations, exchanges, helping to create a great customer experience there. And we see really fast response times, sometimes less than 10 minutes for some of these customers. And then, of course, high customer satisfaction and converting pre-sale questions into orders.
How have you, I guess, just firstly to say, if there's anyone from New Era listening, if they want to send me more Chicago Bears discounts, they're more than welcome to. Thank you very much, Nate, for making that connection for me. Have you been sort of customer focused, customer centric in helping kind of develop the product? What have been some sort of product changes that you've integrated over the last little while that have been directly driven by customer feedback?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm a big believer in customer development. When we first started the company, I read this book called 4 Steps to Epiphany. And I recommend it to every entrepreneur, regardless of the type of business you're building. And it really focuses on this concept of speaking to customers to figure out what you're going to build. And sometimes customers don't say exactly what you're supposed to build, but you really have to synthesize across all those conversations you're having and get to the point of the problem. I think one key functionality that we've rolled out recently is really focusing on attribution incrementality. This is a really hot topic in the marketing and e-commerce world because there's so many marketing solutions. You're running ads on social media, you're sending emails, you're sending text messages, you're running ads on TV, and the customers need multiple touch points, sometimes for them to learn about a solution, learn about a product, and actually purchase. But who gets the credit? Which of these marketing moves is actually driving that? And when we send, our messages from Remarkable, we also want to show where we did not play a role in driving that conversion. So we've developed a lot of different ways to measure attribution. Some of them using AI. I've heard an adage like the best way to solve an AI problem is with more AI. So we're able to show right in our dashboard why we drove a conversion. For example, like the customer purchased the exact product that we recommended to them. And that's quite powerful. Of course, the customer used a promo code that we provided. We were the last touch. There are URL parameters that they clicked on, using all the different ways that exist, including having holdout groups and control groups. So we built that all into the platform to make it easy for brands to see the lift and attribution for all the conversions that we're driving.
Yeah, when we were speaking recently, you said, the promise with AI is that AI is kind of working for you. And I guess, that is sort of epitomized with what you just said there. I guess, that kind of segues into, how are you guys thinking about sort of responsible AI? Where does that fit in with you guys as you build out your product?
Yeah, very critical conversation. Responsible AI means, first of all, respecting user privacy, maintaining secure systems, giving customers and brands control over their data, over their voice. One of the key differences of our platform is we actually have a human in the loop when needed to validate the actions of the AI and messages before they're sent, just to make sure everything is brand safe. So it has to be core and built throughout the system for this to work.
Fantastic. Taking off the Chicago Bears hat and putting on the Microsoft for Startups hat here, Nate, I guess wanted to kind of get a little bit more, be customer centric and hear a little bit more from you around how you've used the Microsoft for Startups program to either build faster or, build credibility as you build out your solution.
Yeah, we're very grateful to partner with Microsoft and Microsoft for Startups. First off, the credits have been very helpful. Just when we were getting started, having those credits to experiment with different parts of the Microsoft suite and platform. I think there's always been resources available to give us technical consultations, speak to us about different products that are available. One example is we were able to get early access to some of the newest OpenAI models when they first were launched. Because people might not know this because there's a very developed platform ecosystem where you can use all these models, but Azure was one of the first places where you could use the OpenAI models when that first became available for companies. And so we were able to get access through Azure, through the Startups program, and that was really helped us kind of get an edge and launch quickly once that became available. Today we use Azure for several different workloads, aside from using it for accessing the most advanced models from OpenAI and other providers. We also use Azure Search to power natural language search across our platform. This feature allows brands to search across all of their customer feedback, including email, social, chat, SMS. And we've also used Microsoft 365 licenses on virtual machines through Azure.
How does being on Azure or building on Azure resonate with your customers? Do you ever speak about Azure products or Azure solutions with your customers?
Yeah, certainly. So whenever you're onboarding an enterprise customer, you typically have to answer questions about where's your data located, how is it served, how is it hosted, how is it encrypted. You might have to complete security questionnaires. And so we answer very confidently, like, hey, we store data on Azure, and Azure is used by governments, by enterprises. It's really one of the top platforms to support that. And I think that gives our customers a lot of confidence and safety, feeling that even though they're working with a startup, it's backed up by a larger player that they can trust.
I guess, looking into the future, what does the next 12 to 18 months hold for Remarkable?
Yeah, we want to continue to work with more brands across more industries. We've started to work with brands in different geographies, like in Europe. We're also looking at the Middle East and working with some partners there. This involves, of course, offering different languages and ensuring that our platform is localized for those different markets. So that's been very exciting. In terms of industries, our core industries have typically been in fashion, beauty, CPG spaces, but we've started to also work with healthcare and wellness, which is also very exciting. So we want to continue to grow and support as many brands as possible and ensure that they're able to give their customers that remarkable personalized experience so every customer can get a one-to-one personalized experience across their journey.
Every customer gets a remarkable experience, says you, Nate.
Yes.
Good stuff. So listen, as this is Founder Friday, want to kind of leave the audience with one last thing. You're a founder. You were working in a corporate. You saw a problem. You went away and you built something to solve that problem. If you were to give sort of one bit of advice to a future founder, what would that be?
Yeah, I think saying yes is something that I've leaned into since being on this journey. So many times, for example, people want to introduce you to someone, and it might not feel like the right fit, but you say, "Hey, yeah, I'll have that conversation." Or maybe there's an event that someone invites you to, or you get an email, and you say, "Yeah, I'll go check it out." Of course, you have to be judicious with your time and prioritize, but I think a lot of people kind of limit their opportunities just because they don't respond or they don't take action or they don't go that place. And sometimes it's raining or it's snowing and it takes a little bit of extra effort, but some of the most magical things that have happened in this business have happened in that serendipity where we just said, "Hey, yeah, let's just try it out." I'll give you an example. Like there was, recently a conference in Abu Dhabi, Shop Talk Lux, and it didn't feel like it was the right fit. It's the first time they're doing the conference, but we said, "Hey, let's just say yes and let's go do it." And that's where we got unlocked, several more brands in Europe specifically who were at that conference who we could connect with. So much of this journey, there's a lot of failure, there's a lot of rejection, and just saying yes to those opportunities is an easy way to increase your wins.
Fantastic. Good stuff. Listen, Nate, thank you so much for your time. And that's another Founder Friday.
Yeah, thanks so much.